Pat Turner, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Lovely to be here.
Now, you were a welfare officer in the 1970s in Alice Springs. What is your response to the violence that we're seeing now?
Well, I think it's a culmination of decades of neglect by all types of governments that we've had in power, both in the Northern Territory and at the Commonwealth level. And what we need to see now is not the knee-jerk reactions that we've seen to date. I mean, the appointment of Darrell, who's a very credible person and comes from a highly respected family, to produce a report on the alcohol restrictions in a few days is totally inadequate. I understand that that report has been handed over today, and I urge the Northern Territory and Commonwealth Government to release it immediately to the public, not to sit on it like they sat on the Little Children a Sacred report all those years ago and led to the Commonwealth intervention. We're not interested in another intervention in the Northern Territory. What we're interested in is utilising the framework that we have in the National Agreement on Closing the Gap, whereby the Northern Territory Government, the Commonwealth Government and Aboriginal leaders in the Northern Territory sit down and work out a fair income strategy to address the lack of housing, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of service delivery in remote areas, and improve the educational outcomes for our children, institute early learning, early childhood learning and development programs, empower communities to have agency by reinstating Aboriginal community-controlled councils that operate in every community, and are able to then negotiate their priorities directly with government once this strategy is worked out. But it will require long-term joint investment by both governments and doing it seriously in a tripartite agreement with the Aboriginal organisations in the Northern Territory and the Aboriginal leaders.
Thank you. That is comprehensive and will have brought a lot of people up to speed on the ways they should be thinking about the current problem. Thank you for that. Just help us understand a little better how we got to this current situation in the short term. I understand that you were in Alice in August and you were already worried about what you were seeing. This is just after the alcohol restrictions were removed overnight. What could have been done then to stop us reaching this point now?
Well, I think that it was a hasty move on the part of the Northern Territory Government, and I think a very foolish one. And what they should have said was, if communities, rather than having to opt in to stay dry, they should have, left it open to communities to stay dry and then write to the government and say, well, we a wet community, rather than the other way around. So I think it was a very foolish move, and it's not the only thing that's led to the problems in Central Australia. The youth were acting out when I was in Alice Springs last August, but this has been going on, for a long time, not as bad as it is at the moment, because I think the volcano's erupting, and I think the volcano will get even worse if we don't do a tripartite agreement between Aboriginal leaders and the two governments. I just want to ask you about the volcano for the moment, because you said that this was predictable, but how are we to understand the surge in violence that we've seen that was that sparked by the lifting of the alcohol restrictions? Is it a simple cause and effect? Not simple. Is it a cause and effect? No, it's the poor living conditions that our people have. Everyone's in overcrowded housing and, inappropriately built housing out on communities as well as in the townships throughout the Northern Territory. So Northern Territory housing the efforts that have been made by the Northern Territory Government and being funded by the Commonwealth to do that have to have a lot more involvement of Aboriginal people at the table deciding those programs, because the way governments are doing it alone has not worked. And
Pat Turner, right now, in order to bring some safety and quiet back to Alice Springs, is the idea of further alcohol restrictions the right answer now? What can be done to secure the town and its surrounds for all of the residents?
Yes, well, I would urge I would say yes, there have to be restrictions while we've got this crisis, because things really have to be brought back in to order, and to give safety and security to all of the people across the Northern Territory, but especially those who are, you know, been impacted so badly in Alice Springs. I mean, I really, you know, am very worried about the situation, and I'm concerned for every citizen in Central Australia, as you know, and I'm especially concerned about our young people and the pathways that they've been forced to take.
Let me ask you about that, because I think the mayor of Alice Springs said that the reason that some of the children are on the streets at night is because it's safer for them to be out than to be at home. What can we do about that, if he's right?
Well, we have to have proper family support wraparound services. I think we need to have an increased level of programming for children, and that's from early childhood. So their, you know, normal neurological development and physical development, as well as their psychological well-being, all of those services have to be available. And it's not easy to get those in remote areas, but we need to deal with the trauma and have a therapeutic approach to the care of the children. I'm a big advocate of early learning centres for Aboriginal, or for all Australian kids. The whole society would benefit from that. But I'm especially keen to have that in Aboriginal communities. Housing and infrastructure have been neglected by every government since colonisation.
What is, Pat Turner, what's the explanation for this? Because as I said at the beginning in the introduction, you have been fighting for the well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities for
all my life.
All your life, for decades. So why do we keep coming back to the same problems?
Because governments are not investing the money. So at the moment, we've got a national homelessness and housing strategy that's got this next 12 months to finalise, and that's an agreement between the Commonwealth and the states. So what we need to do is build into that greater accountability for what the states and territories are doing for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander housing in their areas of responsibility, but we need greater investment. I mean, I do get frustrated with the Northern Territory government, but in this case, I certainly know that they have nowhere near the resources required to do all of the things that need to be done in the Territory without Commonwealth support. So what the governments have to do is listen to what we've been saying and have us at the decision-making table. And the sooner they do that, the better. And I really hope, I know that APON, the peak organisations in the Territory, have written to both the Prime Minister and Natasha Files about this, and I really encourage both those leaders to embrace that approach and enact it as soon as possible.
What would the situation be if we were to have a voice to Parliament? Is this the kind of situation that a voice to Parliament would better address?
They will keep on saying what we've been saying for the last, you know, for decades, ever since we've all been involved, because of the lack of investment by governments.
But does that mean that you are, just to understand, are you in favour of the voice to Parliament?
I am absolutely in favour of the voice, but having a voice, which is absolutely necessary to complete the roadmap of the arrangements that we have nationally for governments to work with our people. But the point is that having a voice won't stop the need for the investment by governments in programs, right? Governments still have to do that. The Aboriginal community-controlled organisations still have to do their service delivery and should be strengthened to do that, because we get much better outcomes than mainstream or anyone else does.
Pat Turner, thank you very much for your breadth of experience and what you brought to us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.